what we're going to do first is I'm going to just talk a little bit, and then Walter, who is our dear editor on the book, will draw us into questions. I must admit I'm a little nervous about putting out a book out there that's free to you all with instructions, for which we will find out how many of you have ordered, and if it's less than 100%, that doesn't bode well. But anyhow, nonetheless, what I want to bring it back to, we've had very interesting talks today, and I know from the profiles of people who have taken their time to come to this conference that most of you are coming from businesses, and most of you are coming from established businesses, banks, grocery, retailers, other things like that. And so what are you going to say when you get there tomorrow about what you've learnt? And you can talk about little ducklings following a dog, which of course was fascinating, and I will never stop thinking about. But nonetheless, what you will probably be interested in, and this comes back to the theme of time, is how much time do you have? I mean, AI is hard. Stuff is still going on. There's terminology being flung around. There's massive disagreement amongst the scientists and then philosophers about what it can and can't do. And in the meantime, businesses have to make decisions. And the first thing I know when there's a new technology on the horizon that traditional businesses do is they say, well, this thing is coming, but we've built a business. What have we got? What have we got that is going to survive this transition and buy us time? Buy us time to get it right, because we have something that the new technology might need or leverage. And this has happened again and again, and I spent a lot of time thinking about disruption, of which this is the key issue. And in that regard, as I was thinking about that question, the one answer that I know comes up in 7 out of 8 of the times this gets asked is data. You know what we have? We have data. I can show you our data. Come look to the computer screen. See the data flow. We've got all this data. Now, James's questions aside about whether that's of any quality, doesn't matter. This is the thing that gets talked about. And in fact, a lot of the business press has hung on this as well. We've had numerous articles all the time over the last year. It's okay. Data is the new oil. If you have data, you're like OPEC. Don't worry. You'll be able to control all of this. Now, there's some issues associated with that. For starters, when you point to a thing you just happen to collect and say that's going to save us, you should at least ask the question, is that really right? Is that really right? Okay? Now, everybody's telling you that the AI, the machine learning, needs data to run. So there is a sense that's like oil, like an internal combustion engine needs oil to run. So does these things need data. But is that right about the data you have, and how do you tell? Okay, so sometimes data has great strategic value. Okay? You may have data about the moon, a small moon, or is that a space station? And that might have great strategic value. But it's not always going to be something you'll lay down your lives for. Now, this all comes back to what we're using the data for. And for current generation machine learning, deep learning, and so on, we're using it for prediction. And what is prediction? It takes the data you have, the good news, and uses it to generate information that you do not have. Want to know the weather tomorrow, the data you don't have? Let's use data on the weather past. Want to know the sales of yogurt next week? Let's use data on the sales of yogurt into the past. And you can use that prediction, of course, to make decisions. And this is a framework from the book of how prediction helps us. We take data as an input. You use it to form a prediction. That allows you to choose a better action, and you get better outcomes as a result. And there's other things that occur as well. So that also reinforces why data might be useful. But the data that we've heard overwhelmingly talked about today is not the data that you put into the decision-making engine when everything is working well. It is a different sort of data. It's the data you have to start this process. It's the data you had to train the machine to work out what the weather was going to be like tomorrow, or what the demand for yogurt is tomorrow. It is the data we call learning. It's learning data. So the learning data is what you use as an input to train an algorithm, and it's the algorithms that you then use to inform actions. But there's an issue with that. And so now, Jay talked about, when we talked about the cost of prediction, it was all Economics 101. This is Economics 201. And it's harder. Okay? Economics 201 says that when you are upstream in a process, that's not a good position to be in. The learning data is upstream. Once you have produced the algorithms, it's devalued. In fact, it might even be discarded. Just ask any scientist in the room who's spent painstakingly creating data to find an outcome and then produced a paper, what they've done with the data after that. Nothing. So that's going to have the lowest value. And that is overwhelmingly the data that you're sitting there pointing to at the moment as the strategic asset. This is what they need to train the algorithms. It's true. It has value in that. It has value in that. They need it to do that. But can you capture that value? Not necessarily, because that comes first. And no one's going to get started buying your data if they have to sell you the entire business to do so. In fact, where the real value is going to be is in the actions. The real strategic value is not in the data you have, but what you happen to be doing as a business. And why is that? Because it generates more data and it generates more timely data, which is what you want. Okay? So like oil, data burns when used. So you have some data, but it's not going to be something you can sustain your business on. And maybe not even buy you time. It is what it is. What is valuable is the ability to generate more data. The ability to generate more, it's what you do. That will generate more data into the future. And basically, otherwise, what the data is what gets destroyed in AI's creative destruction. Okay? So data isn't the thing. Takeaway, data isn't the thing. Data is the thing that gets you to the thing. And that means it's not going to be the highest value in the rung. More of this, and of course our forthcoming book. I think we've got a little time for questions.
Yes. So the book is about what happens when prediction gets cheap. And one thing is that data potentially gets more valuable, but as you just laid out, not necessarily. So how should organizations be changing to set themselves up to actually profit from data? And since we're here to talk about the role of people, what is the role of people in that process?
So there's been a couple of things talked about, and this is where it gets quite interesting. We already saw some examples today of where people were helping training the AIs. And we said, oh, good, people can do that, because someone needs to tell the AI what to do. But you don't have to think very far through that process to know that that's going to be a once-off. Once somebody trains the AI, then everybody, that devalues everybody's role in doing that. So that won't be something. However, we do have people doing ongoing things. We have people operating environments where, to borrow a term from James again, the model isn't stable. Okay? One of the reasons we're good at weather forecasting is because we've trained our statistics and now machine learning and what have you, and it's very, very stable. It's a very bad thing if you add another year of data and everything changes. You've done a bad job. You're doing a bad job of prediction. And so if AI is good at prediction, it won't be doing that. But there will be some unstable environment where the data is getting devalued so quickly that you need ongoing feedback and training going on. And we saw that with the discussion of Cloudflare and that entire process of continual training. And they said that turns out to be the valuable thing. Well, that's not surprising. That makes sense. Okay, that makes sense. So what you have to think about is not thinking about the data as a stock, but think about how people and other things in your organizations are continuing to generate data and how you're going to capture that. Because that is what's going to power the algorithms that get made in the Google Labs or wherever, all these myriad startups.
So let's talk a little bit about judgment. You and Ajay earlier today talk about how judgment becomes potentially more valuable as prediction gets cheaper. But put a little bit of meat on that and kind of put it in the sense of, what skills are organizations actually going to be looking for if, human judgment is what's valuable?
So what we define human judgment as, and this was already reflected in a debate of which there are differing views. To an economist, you have to have a goal. But also, there's something fundamental about what people do to weigh alternatives and weigh trade-offs. They have to work out, for want of a better term, the rate of exchange in their mind about these things to weigh out the trade-offs. Now, I tell you, it's very hard to describe trade-offs to people. It really is. I can tell people you want more of this and that might get less of that, but I can't tell you what the precise quantitative relationship is. But by golly, a machine is going to have to know that. So we have these currently indirect methods of getting the machines to realize what it's like for somebody to walk well or to do whatever. It's only in these situations where we've got games where we've already decided in breakout and etc. We've decided what you have to do to win and what's going to work. You've already told people what the trade-offs are. And even there, we saw with breakout, you get some issues. So judgment is all about that. And that comes from people's experience. That also comes from people's thought. How would I feel about that? Now, Danny Kahneman told us in no uncertain terms that we are terrible at working out that in our own interest, but we still do it. We do it all the time. And we also have this role elsewhere. One of the things that's quite interesting about autonomous vehicles, if you've ever taught a teenager to drive, fortunately I'm blessed to have a wife who thinks I'm a terrible driver, so I haven't had to do it. However, what I do know from that is it's not that they don't know what to do, push the pedal, go fast, go back, and so on. What you're screaming into their ears as you destroy the car seat with your gripped hands is their poor judgment. You're trying to scream judgment into them. No, don't go so fast here when there's another car. Don't do this. Okay? You're trying to communicate to this child these trade-offs. And we know in autonomous vehicles they've been doing the same thing with people. They've had people drive to somehow communicate to the car what the trade-offs are, not just to be a better driver, which maybe they could do otherwise, but also to be for other things like comfortable for the person in the car, right? A machine may not know to do that without being trained that that's the thing to do. And so that's what we call judgment. And it seems to me is once you start putting AI there, it starts exposing how important judgment is. And I suspect we're going to get much clearer about that role and what we want people to do. Susan talked about reward function engineering. I think that's a great term. I don't know if that's going to be people walking around with that function or it's a skill that a lot of people are going to have. But they're going to need it. They're going to need it just to work out what to do with the predictions that they're getting from the AI and also what to do if they wish to interface with the AI and work with them.
Joshua Gans, thank you very much.